I 22F live on the south coast of NSW and this happened in 2021 so I was 19. I grew up here, in the same house I still call home. A large beautiful house surrounded by the bush. When I was a child, the isolation didn't bother me. I loved the open space, the quiet nights, and the stars stretching across the sky. It was my slide of heaven if you will. But as I got older, the isolation started to feel different. Instead of freedom, it felt like a prison. It didn't help that everyone I grew up with left for uni or moved to the suburbs. I stayed behind, partly because I loved this place and partly because I couldn't imagine life anywhere else. I was lonely. Most nights, it was just me, the wind, and the occasional distant bark of a dog or horse neighing. In my boredom I downloaded Tinder. One gloomy afternoon I found myself swiping through profiles that were trot eyes, avid fishermen, or guys I went to school with. One guy stood out however. His name was Harley. He seemed normal, not the kind of guy posing with fish or flexing next to his decked-out Uda. He had an easygoing smile in his photos and a bio that suggested he was thoughtful, maybe even funny. We started chatting and really hit it off. Turns out we had a lot in common and when he asked me on a date I didn't hesitate and said yes. We agreed to meet at our local pub for a drink. When I walked in, he was already there, waiting at a table. He looked like his photos, tall, clean-shaven, and a little more polished than most of the guys around here. He almost looked out of place. The date started off good. He asked me a lot of questions, about my job, hobbies, my life, and how long I'd lived in the area. But as the night went on, his questions became oddly specific. "So, you've lived in the area your whole life?" he asked, leaning forward slightly. "Yeah," I said, brushing it off with a laugh. "Not much changes out here." "And you live alone now?" The way he asked it made my stomach churn. I nodded but quickly changed the subject, asking him about his job. He gave a vague answer about being an accountant, but I could feel him watching me in a way that made me uncomfortable. By the time I finished my second drink, I knew I wouldn't see him again. I made an excuse about needing to get up early and ordered an Uber. When it pulled up, he insisted on walking me to the car. "Are you sure you don't want me to drive you home?" he asked, smiling but not moving out of the way. "It's not safe out here for a woman, let alone the expensive Uber fare." "No, thanks," I said, stepping around him. "This is fine." As the Uber drove me home, I noticed headlights behind us. At first, I thought it was just another car heading in the same direction, but when we turned onto the narrow dirt road leading to my house, the car stopped. Its headlights shut off, and I could feel my chest tighten. I had a sinking feeling in my stomach but somehow convinced myself it was nothing but a coincidence, or someone lost. But then the strange thing started happening. The next morning, I noticed my gate was open. I always close it, always lock it before bed. But there it was, swinging in the breeze. A few days later, I found cigarette butts and beer cans near my bedroom window. To add context, I used to never sleep with my blinds closed as I used to love watching the stars and trying to find constellations. And I used to love waking up to the warm glow of the sun rising above the trees. I don't smoke, and no one ever comes out this way. My stomach dropped, but I told myself it must have been the neighbors messing around. Then, the next night, I woke up to knocking. 3 loud bangs on the front door. The door rattled so much in its hinges I thought the door was going to break. My heart jumped into my throat. I lay frozen in bed, listening, but the house was silent. When I finally worked up the courage to check, no one was there. But on the doormat, I found a lily. My favorite flower. I didn't sleep that night. And I made sure to close all the blinds and double-check the locks. A week later, I was woken again, this time by the crunch of gravel outside my bedroom window. I stayed perfectly still, barely breathing. The sound stopped, and then I heard it. Soft, Deliberate footsteps moving around the side of the house, slowly making its way to my bedroom. I grabbed my phone and crept to the window, my hands shaking. When I peeked through the blinds, my stomach dropped. Harley was standing there, just outside, his face pressed up against the window. His breath fogging up the glass. He wasn't moving, just staring through the window. My heart stopped and I almost screamed. I stood frozen, his face just inches from mine. I called the police, whispering to the operator that someone was outside. They took 2 hours to arrive, but by the time they did, he was long gone. The officers found footprints in the dirt leading away from the house and into the forest. They promised to keep an eye out, but said they couldn't do anything unless there's an attempted break-in. One of the police officers took pity on me and told me to buy security cameras and get a guard dog to protect me. That was 2 weeks ago. Since then, I took the police officer's suggestion and installed cameras and changed all the locks. But it hasn't stopped him from taunting me. Every night at the same time without fail he will appear and walk around my house for hours. Yesterday morning, I found another lily on the doormat. Staring at the lily, a thought crossed my mind. How did he know lilies were my favorite flower? I never mentioned it on our date, I don't think. I was hit with that sinking feeling in my stomach. Was this his plan all along? Was he stalking me before we matched on Tinder? No. Surely not, right? I tried to brush off the questions and went to check the footage from last night. I saw him standing there with this creepy smile, staring directly at the camera. He stood there for hours, watching, waiting. Still with that creepy smile. I grew up here. I know every creak of this house, every sound the wind makes through the trees. But now, every noise feels wrong. I am not sure what to do. The police are of no help. I am currently staying with a friend who was gracious enough to give up their couch. I am terrified to go back home. I am constantly wondering when and if he will find me and do God knows what to me.